The smell of diesel and wet hay hung over the courthouse steps in Caldwell County, Missouri, on the morning of March 14, 2011. Wendell Akins had not planned to be there. He had driven into town for a part for his hay rake and stopped when he saw the crowd. 12-year-old Caleb Tarwater stood at the bottom of the steps in a coat 2 sizes too big. Holding a folded paper, he kept checking against his pocket. The county clerk had already announced the parcel number twice. Nobody had bid. The auctioneer, a man named Russ Pruitt, who had run these sales for 19 years, looked at his clipboard, looked at the boy, and asked if he understood what he was about to do. Caleb said he did. He raised his hand. The bid was $1. Pruitt did not laugh. He asked the boy to repeat it. Caleb repeated it. What happened next would not make sense to anyone in that courtroom for almost 4 months. If you've ever wondered what a kid with nothing but a folded piece of paper can actually do against a system built to ignore him, stay with this one. Subscribe if you think patience and paperwork can still beat money. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether your family has land that's been passed down long enough to have its own stories. Caleb Tarwater had lived with his grandmother, Opal Tarwater, on County Road 212 outside Kingston since he was 4 years old, after his parents died in a car accident on Route 13 in the winter of 2003. Opal raised him on 40 acres that had been the family since 1947, land that grew soybeans most years and a half-acre garden the rest of the time. She was 68 years old by 2011 and had emphysema bad enough that she used a portable oxygen tank to get to the mailbox. Caleb did most of the outside work by the time he was 10. He fed the 2 remaining cattle, fixed fence with wire he bought himself from the Kingston farm and home, and kept the books for the small egg operation Opal ran out of the old hen house, selling to 4 families in town and the Kingston IGA. The field in question was not Opal's land. It was a separate 38-acre parcel 2 miles east on County Road 209, land that had belonged to Caleb's great-grandfather, Hollis Tarwater, since 1812, back when it was still part of the Platte Purchase territory open to settlement. Hollis Tarwater's descendants had farmed it for 6 generations, but by the time Caleb's parents died, the deed had gotten tangled in a chain of inherited fractional ownership that nobody had bothered to sort out. 41 cousins, second cousins, and grandchildren across 9 states held pieces of it, some owning a 64th of an acre on paper and not knowing it. Caldwell County had moved to sell it for $14,300 in unpaid back taxes. Taxes that had accumulated because no single heir felt responsible for a piece of paper showing they owned 3% of a cornfield. Opal had tried to stop the sale through the normal channels first. In September of 2010, she wrote to the Caldwell County Collector's Office asking for a hardship extension, citing her health and the family's multi-generational claim. She received a form letter back in October stating that heir property with more than 25 unlocated owners did not qualify for individual hardship review under Missouri Revised Statute 92.835. In November, she drove to the county assessor's office in person. The assessor, a man named Dale Foncannon who had held the position 11 years, told her he sympathized, but that fractional heir property was, in his words, a paperwork problem older than the courthouse itself, and that the county's only obligation was to notify owners of record, which it had done by certified mail to the 4 addresses on file. 3 of those letters had come back undeliverable. Opal pointed out that meant 37 of the 41 heirs never knew the sale was happening. Foncannon agreed this was likely true. He said it changed nothing procedurally. In December, Opal asked her neighbor, Hutch Reeves, who had served 2 terms on the county commission, whether anything could be done. Reeves said heir property sales happened 3 or 4 times a year in Caldwell County alone, and that once the back taxes hit a certain threshold, the sale was close to automatic. That's just how the county clears these, he told her. Nobody's fault, really. It's just old land nobody got around to fixing. Opal did not argue with him. She thanked him and drove home. That night, by her account later, she sat at her kitchen table and told Caleb the field would likely be sold to whoever showed up with the most cash. Probably a hunting lease company or a row crop operation out of Chillicothe that had bought 2 other heir parcels in the county over the previous 5 years. What changed things started with a shoebox. In January of 2011, Kayla was looking for a flashlight battery in Opal's hall closet and pulled down a shoebox he'd never opened, marked in faded pencil H, tar water, papers. Inside were 11 items. A handwritten 1962 partition agreement between 3 of Hollis Tarwater's grandchildren. A 1978 letter from a Caldwell County title attorney named Verlin Stoddard explaining that the heirs had informally agreed never to force a partition sale of the parcel, so long as Tarwater blood worked the home place. And 7 index cards listing every known descendant and their estimated fractional share as of 1981, compiled, it appeared, by Hollis's own daughter. Caleb did not understand what he was looking at right away. He brought it to Opal. She read the 1978 letter twice and went quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone and called the only name on it still listed in a Missouri phone directory. Verlin Stoddard's son, Reese, who had taken over his father's small title practice in Cameron. Reese Stoddard told Opal something the county had never mentioned. Under Missouri's Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act, passed in 2019, wait, he corrected himself. Under a related provision that predated that act, heir property sold for delinquent taxes at public auction was still subject to existing co-owners' right of redemption for 1 year after sale, provided notice defects could be shown. The 3 undeliverable certified letters were notice defect. This did not stop the auction. It meant that whoever won the bid would not get a clean title for at least 12 months. And any of the 41 heirs could still redeem their share by paying their portion of the back taxes plus interest. Most buyers, Stoddard said, walked away from heir property auctions for exactly this reason. It rarely sold for what it should, because nobody wanted a year of legal uncertainty hanging over a $14,300 tax debt. Caleb asked his grandmother what would happen if nobody bid at all. She said the county would likely relist it year after year until someone with patience and no need for clean money showed up. Caleb spent the next 6 weeks doing something nobody asked him to do. He used the 7 index cards to track down as many of the 41 heirs as he could reach by phone and letter, working from a Caldwell County library computer after school 3 days a week. He found 19 of them. 11 didn't know they had any claim on the land at all. 8 said they'd sign whatever he needed if it meant the county tax bill went away. He drafted, with Reese Stoddard reviewing it for $40 an hour over 2 short phone calls, a simple notarized agreement. Any heir who wanted to keep their fractional interest could assign Caleb their voting share in any future redemption decision, in exchange for nothing, since the land produced no income and they'd never spent a dollar on its taxes. 14 heirs signed and mailed it back. Caleb kept a spreadsheet, an actual one, built in the school library on a borrowed login, tracking names, addresses, response dates, and percentage shares. By March, he held assigned authority over roughly 31% of the parcel, more than any other single party alive. He did not tell anyone in town what he was doing. Opal knew. Reese Stoddard knew. Nobody else did, including Hutch Reeves, who still believed the field would go to whichever cash buyer showed up in March. On the morning of the auction, 2 other parties did show up. A representative from a Chillicothe grain operation named Phil Ostrander walked the gravel lot with a thermos of coffee, confident, having already looked up that the parcel had clear utility for row crops. A second man, representing a hunting lease investment group out of Kansas City, stood near the steps reviewing a printout. Both men assumed, reasonably, that the sale would go the way these sales usually went. Highest bidder takes the tax debt, gets a deed, and deals with any heir disputes later, since most heirs never surface to contest anything. Neither man had any way of knowing that 31% of the eventual ownership claim was standing 20 feet away from them in a coat that had belonged to his late father. Pruitt opened the bidding at the back tax amount, $14,300. Ostrander did not bid immediately. He had seen heir parcels sit unbid before, prices creeping up only when someone got nervous. Caleb raised his hand and bid $1 over the back tax minimum allowed under the county's posted bidding increment rule, which set the floor increment at $1 for parcels under $20,000 in assessed value. A rule almost nobody used because almost nobody bid at the floor. Pruitt asked him to confirm. Caleb confirmed. Neither Ostrander nor the Kansas City man raised a counterbid right away, because both assumed a 12-year-old's dollar bid was a formality that would be topped within seconds. 30 seconds passed. Pruitt asked for any further bids a second time. Ostrander finally raised his hand at $14,500. Caleb said, calmly, that he would like to invoke a co-owner's preemptive right to match the high bid, a provision Stoddard had confirmed existed under the county's own auction rules for any bidder who already held a documented fractional ownership interest in the parcel being sold. Pruitt had never had anyone invoke it. He asked Caleb for documentation. Caleb handed him a manila folder containing the 14 signed assignments and the 1978 letter. Pruitt read for several minutes while the lot went quiet. Then he said the preemptive match stood. The parcel went to Caleb Tarwater as agent for the assignor heirs for $14,500, matched at the floor through documented fractional interest rather than outbid in cash. Ostrander left without much comment, noting only that he hadn't seen that rule invoked in years of buying county parcels. The Kansas City man never raised his printout again. What the courthouse did not understand that morning, and what took until July of 2011 to fully sort out, was not the price. $14,500 for 38 acres was, if anything, a fair tax sale number. What confused the clerk's office was the paperwork. A 12-year-old listed as the matching bidder, backed by an authority document representing nearly a third of a fractured, sixth-generation ownership chain that the county itself had spent decades treating as unsolvable. Dale Foncannon told a reporter from the Cameron Citizen-Observer in June that he had processed roughly 60 heir property sales in his 11 years and had never seen a buyer show up with what amounted to a partial reconstruction of the entire ownership tree. He said it plainly, without praise, the way a man describes a piece of machinery doing something he had not expected it to do. By July, Stoddard had filed the paperwork to formally consolidate the redeemed and assigned shares. Caleb, through Opal as his legal guardian, held controlling interest in the parcel. The remaining heirs who had not responded retained their fractional shares, undisturbed, exactly as the 1978 letter had intended. The land was not flipped. It was not leased to the hunting group or sold to Ostrander's operation. Opal put it back in his soybeans that same spring, planting 38 acres on April 9th with a rented no-till drill from the Kingston Co-op at a cost of $1,200 for the rental and seed. Caleb did not give an interview beyond the one short quote the Citizen-Observer ran. He went back to 7th grade. He kept the spreadsheet, just in case any of the other 22 unreached heirs ever wrote back. Hollis Tarwater wrote nothing down about why he held on to that field through 2 world wars and a depression, only that the family ought to keep it whole. His daughter wrote the names down in 1981 because she had a feeling someone might need them someday. Verlin Stoddard wrote a letter in 1978 to nobody in particular, just in case. None of them lived to see a 12-year-old read those papers in a hall closet 70 years on and put the whole thing back together with a phone, a spreadsheet, and a dollar bill. The field is still planted in soybeans. Opal still uses the oxygen tank to get to the mailbox. Caleb still feeds the cattle before school.